Thanks for the opportunity to speak to you all today. Just very brief background on who I am and who's standing here in front of you. My name's James. I've basically been trying to understand consumer behaviour and audience behaviour for the last 20 odd years. Previously worked at Nielsen running a number of panels and recently joined IPSOS to lead IRIS, the EUCOM endorsed service for measuring online behaviour in the UK. And so what I wanted to try and talk a little bit about today, thinking about the broader debate on measurement, was the sort of areas that I think are important for measurement to succeed, having led some successful measurement services and also seen some that have struggled in my time in those roles. And really trying to apply a bit of that thinking to what we're trying to do with the online measurement space, why I think the online measurement space is so key to the online and understanding of consumers going forward. So if I step back and think about what the purpose of measurement is, and I think, as I say, I think this applies to the debates I saw in the previous room where the effective measurement was moving up and down in terms of its importance. But for me, maybe not the most exciting terminology to think about why is measurement important and what makes measurement sustainable. But ultimately, the measurement needs to be relevant. It needs to be at the point that you need it. It needs to be useful to what you're trying to achieve. And then ultimately, it needs to be valuable. And the sustainability of any measurement service and how measurement will be utilised will ultimately, in my mind, be defined by these three things. As an industry and as a measurement sort of company as like IPSOS, it's important that we stay across how each of these are evolving. When we're trying to create an audience measurement for the industry, as we are doing for EUCOM, what is it that keeps this service relevant? For us, that's looking ahead. What are the milestones that we need to achieve? Where are the roadblocks in terms of online measurement? You can imagine how much you could include in online measurement. So how do we navigate that forward? How do we speak to partners to move that forward? Because that's what's going to make it useful for people and actionable when they actually need to access that data. And ultimately, we need to know that the data that we're creating is part of the value chain. We heard a little bit there about some of the numbers that are floating around in the industry, and it's important that we never take our eye off that. And in my mind, trusted objective people measurement has never been more important. I've been to a number of conferences recently where everybody's talking about we've got to measure people, we've got to build our own first-party data sets, we have to understand those audiences. And that $46 billion is the e-marketeer's view of media ad spend in the UK in 2022. I was going to convert it to pounds, but you don't need to anymore. But that is the landscape that we're broadly operating in. We've heard some big numbers talked about in the previous session. Specifically thinking about where most of that spend's going and where most of that investment and understanding needs to come from, it's actually in the digital sector. So same source, $36 billion expected to be spent on digital in 2022. So if we step back and say, okay, that's what's going on in advertising, where that advertising is being played out, what pitch it's being played on is that broader online universe. And so it's so important that we understand and have a language which allows trust, allows an acceptance that data flowing around that space is credible, and a common language to help make decisions that fuel those types of investments. And that's where it's important from my perspective to sort of talk a little bit about what EUCOM do as one of a number of I guess almost JIC-type organisations in the UK, for example, because we're trying to make sure that we're working with EUCOM to be ahead of those roadblocks, those holes in the road that need to be filled. And from my side, having recently come to this relationship, what I've found to be really useful, and it's really important that people know, is that behind the sort of the badge, if you like, of the EUCOM endorsement, there's the opportunity for us to be working through the tech boards, the commercial boards, on cross-industry groups to drive measurement that is useful and can be valuable in that driving and understanding of the broader landscape. And so understanding audiences for me is absolutely crucial to how we all need to go forward. And in my mind, if you don't understand online now, you just don't understand people in terms of the opportunity. And the latest establishment survey that we run with PAMCO identifies that we've now tipped over 50 million individuals utilising online, up nearly 3 million since May 2020. So if everybody leaves today thinking about media for the future, one thing you need to understand is the online space. And when I first joined the team, I asked them, how important is online in the media world? I've been in and out of the media space, worked a lot on shopper and panels and various things like that at Nielsen. But we are actually projecting for those 50 million people, we're measuring, or trying to represent rather, 15 seconds of behaviour in every minute for every person over 15 years old. There is a slight caveat to that, I have to admit, to tell a good story. That assumes that we're all sleeping for 8 hours a day, which I'm sure you all are. But you get a feel for how important that online space is, and it's only growing in terms of its importance. That's the average. So we need to delve a little bit deeper and go under those averages. And immediately as you sort of delve one level below, a subtle variation in terms of looking at breaks by age. But we can start to see how, for 18 to 24-year-olds, the data starts to show what we think is true. And that's the point, that it's taking away what we think is true to be an actual, truthful data that can support decisions that we're making across the total industry. 5 hours a day, 20 seconds per minute for those people 18 to 24 in terms of their engagement online. And somehow we've got to understand what that is and understand how that fits in to their broader behaviours, understand the context of that behaviour, and I'll talk to that in a second. And a big thing for me about being in the sort of online part of our world is media convergence. And I find this area quite challenging in a way, because if I think about my own journey to this conference today, I utilised an online train app to book my ticket. I watched the highlights or the lowlights of York City on my phone this morning as I came in. I've navigated across the underground, et cetera, and ultimately that convergence is coming around the devices like mobile. And again, in terms of measurement, it's so important that we understand that broader perspective of online and how it fits into that broader space. The danger, of course, as you always get told off when you're from an agency, is like, don't talk about your own experiences. You need to show how it's actually playing out at a macro level. And again, if I just think about instinctively what's going on and then actually look at the data, the bit for me around this whole space and thinking of broader consumer behaviour is we're quite clearly seeing from the data on the left-hand side there that time spent as a share of all media on digital is nearly 60% and forecast to be over 60, nearly 62% by 2024. But for me, what's really important is how the rounded view of what's happening online is on the right-hand side, which is the connection between how people are shopping, how people are behaving in their daily lives to make purchases. And there's some research there from IPSOS which talks a lot about how online is the space where research is happening, where I'm looking to buy online, get it collected, get it delivered. And that whole omni-channel perspective is the backdrop to the measurement that we all need to better understand. Because ultimately, if we want to influence purchasing through the media that we deliver, or build brands for ultimate purchasing, the UK is a great market to understand because nearly 36% of commerce is now going through online. And it is about the people, but it's important to know that we're all accessing in different ways, right? Excuse me, just under 20% of those 50 million individuals that I talked about before are utilising just one device, but it does mean that 80% are using more than one device to access online. And ultimately, we have to understand how those people are coming to online. Because I keep saying people on purpose, because it is about people and it's not about the tech. It's not the technology that makes the purchase. Technology is a great thing. Every time it's utilised, it creates a data point. But the danger is that we get obsessed with the traffic and the flow, when actually, because we've just seen that, lots of people are using multiple devices, we need to be able to deduplicate and understand what's going on behind that data. And so for us at IPSOS and the solution we've played out, we do see it as a combination in terms of measurement of needing census traffic information, but utilising a single source panel of 10,000 people, which allows us to build up that broader picture, make sure we are able to provide to this group of people and beyond, a true understanding of the consumer that sits behind the device, which ultimately becomes the audience for our media. As you all know, anything to do with people has got a lot of challenges against it and a lot of headwinds at the moment. And the challenge of consumer-based measurement is facing right into that. And so, for me, there's 2 or 3 areas at a really high level, which I could spend an hour on talking about, are really important for us to consider. The first, though, is that we have to be able to navigate the privacy guardrails. It has to be the number one thing we think about when we're utilizing people data. And we will continue to drive to understand how to do that. But it's important, again, I think, as an industry, when we think about measurement, that we commit to saying, yes, that is the number one thing. We're going to protect this data. We're not going to take shortcuts, and we're going to invest in it properly. And I'm really proud to be at a company like IPSOS. Being new to that company now, I can see that's absolutely the case. I think we've got to continue to build up the trust of consumers and end users of media. I find it really interesting when I tell people what my job is, and I sort of end up sort of saying, we're looking at what people are doing online. And half the people I speak to shut down and get nervous, and I go, no, don't worry, it's all under control. But that ability to see what people are doing and adapt, but bring the broader group of people out there with us to say that, hey, look, online measurement is a good thing and it's not a scary thing, and we're not actually, making anything that makes your life difficult, is really important. And ultimately, why is that important? Is because everybody in this room and the previous conferences I've been to recently are saying we want to connect more data. So if we want to be able to connect more data, there's even more onus on us protecting the people data that this all sits within, so we're able to make sure we've got that connection, get the value flowing. Because if we want measurement data around consumers to remain relevant and to remain useful, we have to find the connectivity. And so to me, this is a really important page, but we have to deal with it. And the way we're dealing with it in the measurement that we provide, and I won't go into loads of technical detail, partly because I can't, is we're utilising what you might call the idea of synthetic panels. And put simply, what that means is that we're taking our base understanding of those 10,000 people and our understanding of the census and the data that's out there in the traffic data. And then creating a model data set which allows us to look at a much greater number of people with a greater number of devices, and then build out additional information into our service, which I'll come on to in a second. But why that's important is because we're creating a data construct which takes on the notion of privacy for the future. It allows us to build up the contextual requirements that we need. It allows us to scale, and it allows us to get a better linkage to other data sets, not necessarily fitting into the audience measurement that you endorse, but it allows us to take that data and build on it in the future. And I'll just show you a couple of things which have really resonated from us trying to take on, challenges that are around panels. The first being, we've introduced city-level data, we've introduced time of day data more granularly, and it might not look like great granularity from a timing perspective, but it's been a really big step forward for the people who are utilising the data. And again, I'm trying to use it more as a reflection of what do you do to stay relevant? Only reporting the total was not enough for our end users, so we've moved that forward. So it's about staying relevant and finding your audience at the right time, as you all know. It's about us being able to connect both behaviour and attitudes. And linking surveys is one thing that we've been able to do through this bigger data construct. And now we're able to start to say, as you think about that planning and making your execution on your media, what is the broader behaviour that is going on? And then how can I build the context of that in terms of getting a better understanding of how people are behaving? And again, more about explaining how we're trying to drive our usefulness to the industry. It's allowing us to connect to existing industry approaches. So this an example here of CACI's fresco segments and some work we did looking at movement into new banks versus traditional banks. But that again is really important in terms of the subtlety of, as we think about broadening our understanding of consumers. In the last session we talked a lot about there's going to be a need to try and drive our understanding of a much broader set of factors around individuals. This is going to give us an opportunity to do that. And I think this connectivity within the industry is going to be a key thing. It's going to need collaboration. And part of that collaboration, in my mind, it might link to last session a little bit, is we have to be open to finding ways where the media that people consume can be better connected. And I think online is a real challenge. I've said before that it's so central to what we do. It's got video connections, it's got audio connections, it's got readership connections amongst everything else that it does. And here's a great example of where, working with PAMCO, we've been able to fuse the data sets together, because we have to acknowledge that readership is both print and it's digital and it's by device. And for those media owners, they need to know that broader reach. If you think about planning, you need to know there's an opportunity to utilize both data sets. And finally, thinking about what we need to do from a measurement perspective. I really believe as a measurement industry, we need to keep the data real. We need to make sure that people connect to the storyline that is in the data. It's really easy just to go into a little measurement bubble and you lose yourself a little bit in my experience. Whereas actually, from being able to go down to daily data with the IPSOS IRIS service, you can start to see yourself in these stories, you know, like what you did in lockdown or what you did during the petrol crisis. And having and working on a data set that connects to you as an individual means you can tell those stories in the pub, and it begins to grow the belief in the system that you're measuring. So what does it mean in terms of a future-ready objective measurement? You know, and I'm pleased to be part of an amazing service. But as we look forward, what do I think we need to do? What do I think we as individuals and companies need to do from a measurement perspective? We're going to continue to look to expand the measurement. From our perspective, that will be about the breadth and depth that we can achieve. I said before, I think media behaviour is colliding, and online is at the heart of that collision. So for us to be relevant, we need to have a view on whether it's video, podcast, gaming, wearables, CTV, and that will be defined in conjunction with our partners and in conjunction with UCOM, and getting feedback from customers as to what is it that service needs to look like and what is the measurement that they need. And so we're like IPSOS being brave and having the courage to invest in that to make sure we get that return. Consumer focus for me is a big thing in terms of expanding our ability to talk about the consumer. Our plan is to build out more on that audience side. I've heard a lot today, and it's on our roadmap around trying to understand how can we be part of the sustainability debate, what can we do to understand cost of living. And I think, you know, a good challenge I've taken from the first session is to continue to look at, and we started this process actually driven by a D&I group inside IPSOS, like what is it we could do around diversity and inclusion that's better and could be better within our measurement service, because again, if it's not measured, then it can't be commented on and it can't be reviewed. And so that becomes a mission for us. And finally, being open to data connectivity, working out how our data can connect to other data sets from a media perspective, but those first-party data sets, so that you can build in really strong, trustworthy, actionable measurement services into your own data and make better decisions to drive that investment in media going forward. Thank you very much.